Very warm welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to our viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is Mike Embley. Our top stories.
The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
The most radical tax overhaul in decades is on course to pass the US Congress despite a last-minute hitch. In her first TV interview, Harvey Weinstein's former assistant tells the BBC why she's breaking a non-disclosure agreement to speak out about him. At least 12 tourists are killed as a bus traveling to Mayan ruins crashes and overturns in eastern Mexico. And we report on the super agers as scientists say they're close to finding drugs to help stop people getting old. Hello to you. The US Senate is debating right now a tax bill that looks set to give Donald Trump the first big legislative win of his presidency. Sets out the biggest changes to the tax system in 3 decades. Republicans say it will boost growth and revive the economy. Democrats argue it benefits America's richest and will inflate the deficit. The president's celebrations may be put off for the day, though, because a technicality with the wording of the bill means the lower house of Congress must vote again tomorrow. Let's go live now, straight away to our correspondent in Washington for us. David, how you see this bill, I guess, depends on your politics. Descriptions of it from Republicans and from Democrats could come from different universes.
They absolutely do. Right, and they voted in favour of this in the House of Representatives earlier, but because of that procedural glitch which you mentioned, they will now have to vote on it all over again in the morning. We're still waiting on a Senate vote on this bill tonight, but it's unlikely all of this to change the outcome, and every indication that President Trump will sign this controversial measure into law in the next few days, possibly as early as tomorrow. Now, this bill includes permanent tax cuts for corporations and temporary tax cuts for individual American citizens. Nonetheless, around 80% of the American population is expected to see some sort of tax cut starting from next year. Democrats, of course, are unanimously opposed to this bill. They say that it's only the wealthy who really stand to benefit from it long term. And this is what the House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, had to say.
This is the worst bill to ever come to the floor of the House, with stiff competition for what some of the things they've tried to do. The worst bill in history because of the number of people it affects, the amount of money it sucks up to the higher income, and the impact on our future deficits.
Republicans, of course, see this as their finest hour. It's their first major piece of legislation passed in this Trump presidency, despite the fact that the Republicans enjoy a majority in both houses of Congress. This was what the House leader, Paul Ryan, had to say.
On January 1, Americans are going to wake up with a new tax code. In February, they're going to see withholdings go down so they see bigger paychecks. And April 15th will be the last day they can comply with the old bad system. This is a good day for America. This is a good day for workers. This is a great day for growth, and we're very excited about this moment. Thank you.
Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House. David, a lot of this, according to The Economist, seems to depend on whether you believe in trickle-down economics, whether something that's good for the wealthiest and for corporations works its way down through the economy. It does seem very likely, doesn't it? It's going to increase the deficit substantially, and it seems very likely there will be cuts, surely, in welfare, healthcare, veterans' benefits to pay for it.
Yes, absolutely. Very interesting you mentioned trickle-down economics there. We haven't heard that term since the Reagan years, but that's absolutely right. That's hope that this will, despite ballooning the national deficit here, putting an extra $1 trillion, it's thought, on the debt, the American debt, that this will boost the economy long term and pay for itself. For precisely the reasons that you mentioned there, Mike, trickle-down economics. There are those, though, who are very dubious about that and believe that this is just going to put the American economy into even more of a hole. Interestingly, given the fact that the stock market here is booming, the economy is doing well, President Trump's approval rating is at an all-time low. Normally, a good economy means good approval ratings for a president, but not in this particular case. So the White House is hoping for a bump in that from the passage of this bill, and hence it's planning a celebration, probably around about 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, Mike.
David, thank you very much. We shall keep people posted, of course, on how the bill progresses or not. Thank you very much indeed. Plenty of detail and analysis on the tax bill, along with our other main stories on the BBC website, of course. That is bbc.com/news. Let's quickly round up some more of the main news for you briefly. The defeated candidate in presidential elections in Honduras, Salvador Nasralla, has accepted an invitation for talks with the president, Juan Orlando Hernández. Nasralla has accused his rival of rigging the bitterly disputed elections. At least 14 people have been killed in street protests since last month's vote. America and Canada have announced they'll host a summit next month to measure efforts to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions. There have been reports, of course, the US is trying to negotiate a new UN resolution for tougher sanctions on Pyongyang. North Korea is already under an arms embargo, and trade in exports such as coal and textiles have been banned. The team investigating the Amtrak train crash near Seattle say the brakes were automatically activated at the time of the accident rather than being applied by the engineer. It's emerged a trainee was in the cab with the engineer at the time. The cause of the accident still not fully established. 3 people died, dozens more were hurt when the train came off the rails and crashed onto an interstate route on Monday morning. Austria's new Chancellor has travelled to Brussels to reassure European leaders his government is committed to the European Union. Sebastian Kurz, who leads the Conservative People's Party, has entered into an alliance with the Eurosceptic and anti-immigration Freedom Party, and that sparked alarm in Brussels. In her first broadcast interview, a former colleague of the Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein has told the BBC how she was warned about his behaviour and how she went on to warn other women that he could behave in an inappropriate manner. But Zelda Perkins says matters escalated after he sexually assaulted a colleague, and she accused him of attempted rape. Harvey Weinstein denies all allegations of non-consensual sex. Our entertainment correspondent Colin Patterson has the story.
Looked at the interview. And to put this into context, this was 19 years ago, 1998. Harvey Weinstein was at the peak of his powers. He was just about to release Shakespeare and on to win him his only Oscar in the following year. Now, in September 1998, his personal assistant in the UK, Zelda Perkins, who was then 24, quit. Speaking to Newsnight, she explained she endured a number of years of sexual harassment, but then came the final straw.
And it came to a head for you when he sexually assaulted, attempted rape on your colleague?
Yes. We were at the Venice Film Festival and he tried to rape her.
And what did you do?
She was extremely distressed. She was shaking, very distressed, clearly in shock. Didn't want anybody to know, was absolutely terrified of the consequences, what would happen. And I spoke with her and tried to calm her for about half an hour, and then I went straight downstairs to where Harvey was having a business meeting on the terrace and told him he needed to come with me right away. For me to have broken into a meeting like that was very unusual, and he did not question me. He got up and came with me straight away because he knew why I was as angry and serious as I was.
So you accused him of attempted rape?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he denied it?
Yes.
And then
he said nothing at all had happened, and he swore on the life of his wife and his children, which was his best get out of jail card that he used quite a lot.
Now, the 2 women secured legal representation. They were hoping to bring down Weinstein by revealing his behaviour to Disney, who owned his company. Miramax, but their lawyers said that wasn't a realistic option. The only option was a damages agreement. This included the creation of a complaints procedure at Miramax and therapy from Mr. Weinstein. It is not known if these stipulations were carried out. Zelda Perkins signed a non-disclosure agreement. She received a sum of £125,000. In the interview, she calls for Britain to follow the example of a number of US states and end the practice of allowing sexual assaults to be hidden behind non-disclosure agreements. A spokesperson for Harvey Weinstein says he unequivocally denies any allegations of non-consensual sex.
Colin Patterson there on Zelda Perkins' interview with Emily Maitlis. And just to reiterate, in response to the allegations, a lawyer for Harvey Weinstein says he categorically denies engaging in any non-consensual conduct or threat behavior. At least 12 tourists have died in a bus crash in the Mexican state of Quintana Roo. They were travelling to visit a Mayan ruin when the bus overturned. Our Mexico correspondent Will Grant reports.
The group on the bus was comprised of passengers from the United States, Italy, Sweden and Brazil, as well as a driver and tour guides from Mexico. The tourists had arrived in Mexico on board a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, and this, a visit to the beautiful Mayan ruins of Chachoben, was meant to be a pleasurable day trip to see a little of the country. However, a dozen people were killed and many more injured when the bus overturned on the highway out to the ruins, south of the popular resort of Tulum. Some of the injured have already been discharged, but others are being treated in 4 different hospitals in the region. An investigation is underway as to the cause of the crash. Many of the coastal roads in that particular state of Quintana Roo are poor and potholed, especially on the southern road down to the border with Belize. However, for the time being, the authorities have made no comment as to what they think might have caused the bus to overturn. Will Grant, BBC News.
Doctors in Bolivia have clashed with police after almost a month of strikes by the country's healthcare workers. Riot police used tear gas in the confrontation. The walkouts in Bolivia's hospitals have led to long delays for patients and thousands of cancelled operations. The doctors say new laws overseeing healthcare proposed by the government are unfair. Andrew Plant reports.
Firing tear gas at protesters in Bolivia on Tuesday, police in riot gear, their opponents wearing white coats, as doctors here take to the streets to challenge the government over proposed new laws governing the healthcare industry. The doctors in Bolivia have been on strike since November the 23rd, this clash with police taking place in the capital La Paz. Doctors are at proposals for a new criminal code they say will penalise professionals. Legislation designed, the government says, to protect people from negligence. Doctors say it could leave them jobless, bankrupt or even in jail.
They are trying to create very unfair laws which put our current doctors at risk. They are laws that can put a doctor in prison, take away their assets and take away their title.
This was the 26th day of strikes. Many thousands of Bolivians have been affected, with hospitals struggling with admissions and patients facing long delays and cancellations. Doctors, joined by pharmacists too, have taken their protest to the streets, two sides throwing gas canisters at each other over the flames on a public road. Meanwhile, the government has organised health fairs in the city. Medical events that people can attend to get the treatment they need while negotiations with continue. Andrew Plant, BBC News.
Not a sight you see every day. Much more to come for you on BBC News, including this. There's a lesson. And then there's leftovers. We tell you about the turkey bones that date back nearly 500 years. Very glad to have you with us on BBC News. The latest headlines. Donald Trump's tax reforms look set to gain approval in both houses of Congress, despite a last-minute glitch over some of the small print. Former co-worker of the Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein has told the BBC how she was warned about his behavior. American scientists are predicting that before long it will be increasingly normal to start a new career in your 80s and to feel fit and healthy in body and mind. And increasingly normal to take on a new physical challenge in your 90s, walking for miles with no aches or pains. I'm feeling much older just talking about it. The scientists are working on drugs that could help delay the way our bodies age, meaning we'll be able to do much more for much longer. In the second of his reports on the so-called super agers, our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh has been to San Francisco and New York.
New York Public Library, one of the city's grandest buildings, which has its oldest employees. Hilda Jaffe is still going strong at 95. So what's her secret to a long life?
Pick your parents. It really is. It's got to be genetic, because both my parents lived long. Good morning, Fergus. I'm glad you could meet me here in this absolutely beautiful room.
Hilda gives tours of this historic building when she's not at the theatre, music concerts, opera, or her 2 book clubs.
I don't exercise. I walk. I walk a lot. If I had to give anybody advice, I would say just keep moving.
Samples of Hilda's DNA are stored in this freezer in the Bronx, part of a study into longevity. They found only 1 in 10,000 people has protective superager genes, but say drugs might be able to help the rest of us. Metformin is an old, cheap diabetes drug, but a major trial is planned to see if it can delay aging.
I can get you 690 of those for $60.
Scientists here believe it may slow the biological processes that trigger key diseases.
We have data in humans that metformin would delay cardiovascular disease and will delay diabetes and is associated with less cancer and seems to delay Alzheimer or cognitive decline in people.
Aging is an inevitable process which begins as we reach adulthood and continues through the decades as our muscles, bones and organs gradually wear out. This Tai Chi group in San Francisco showed that we can delay that decline. It helps with balance, core strength, and provides a social network.
It makes me feel so young. I have so much fun. There's so much, I feel like I'm in the kindergarten of the universe.
My mother lived to 103. I don't desire to live that long, but I want to be as healthy as I can, as long as I can.
That's an ambition we can all share.
Imagine a future where it didn't hurt to get old, where our joints didn't wear out. It would have a huge impact on our quality of life as we age.
This biotech company in California has developed a drug to counter one of the key diseases of aging, osteoarthritis. Human trials of this experimental compound should begin next year.
This is an area of the cartilage that is now diseased. You can see the cartilage is damaged.
It works by clearing cells which build up in the knee joint, known as senescent cells, which may be a trigger for the painful condition.
A single injection that we believe and hope will alleviate their pain and begin the restorative process in their knee to perhaps at least halt, regress, and even completely repair the knee in the end, is what our wildest hopes would imagine.
That would mean more people could age like Hilda, free of aches and pains, and independent well into their 90s. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, New York.
The former boss of one of Latin America's largest construction companies, Marcelo Odebrecht, has been released from prison. He'll serve the rest of his sentence at his luxury home in the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo under house arrest. He still has 7 years to serve for bribing politicians in dozens of countries. He was arrested in 2015, sentenced to 19 years in prison, but struck a plea bargain with prosecutors, agreeing to testify in exchange for a more lenient sentence. The English writer Jane Austen put pen to paper 200 years ago, the tales of romance and love. Her novels still find new fans all over the world, and for one book club in Pakistan, they've now devoted themselves entirely to her works. Here's their story.
Really? You've married Mr. Darcy? Yeah, I have. Oh my God, you guys. Seriously.
In a way. Yes.
I'm Laleen Sukhera. I'm the founder of the Jane Austen Society of Pakistan. It started off as a Facebook page, and then we had a dress-up tee, super eccentric, super quirky, and it was just so much fun, there was no looking back. So hands folded in front is a very Regency pose, ladies. Let's do one of their hands clasped in the front. We discuss things and we analyze things. We draw parallels to our own lives and the society around us. And we see Mr. Collins and Mr. Elton. We see Mr. Wickham and Willoughby. We don't really see Mr. Darcy very much. We would love to.
For Lizzie, overcoming prejudice in her life was the biggest hurdle that she overcame.
Yeah, it's very easy for us, you know, in the Commonwealth and with our post-colonial legacy to sort of draw parallels between the Regency era 200 years ago and our society here in South Asia right now. And it's always very amusing and entertaining, but then there's a dark side to it as well. I mean, the misogyny and the hypocrisy and keeping up appearances.
I'm also married to Mr. Bennett. Oh, yes, okay. Mr. Darcy. Sometimes he may become Mr. Collins, too.
That's very interesting.
We still have a lot of similarities with 200 years ago England. And that's basically, especially for women, our sphere is limited. The power we have over our own lives is limited. Our financial independence is limited. Do I need to go on more? Marriage Mart, it's the same here. It's over a tea trolley. Literally, the girl is expected to pour tea as the in-laws are sitting, and how she pours the tea and how she hands the cups and all these things are very, she has to be demure. She has to be domestic. That's Regency England, isn't it?
That's why she's so popular in Pakistan. It's a comfort to read Austen, I think. I think that's how I describe it. It is like the greatest comfort to lose yourself in works.
1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hand, 2, 3, 4. Switch, 2, 3, 4. And stop, 2, 3, 4. And then curtsy.
Christmas is fast approaching, and for many, turkey is the star of the holiday menu. Well, now archaeologists in the UK believe they've discovered the oldest turkey ever found here, dating back almost 500 years. John Kay has the scoop.
A traditional turkey dinner with all the trimmings. But it seems they've been gobbling it up here in Devon for much longer than anybody realised. At Exeter University, a surprise discovery.
At first I wasn't sure because it looks like a giant chicken.
In a pile of ancient animal remains found here in the 80s, 2 mysterious thigh bones and a wing. Archaeologists have now established they're from an American species of turkey nearly 500 years ago, believed to be the oldest ever found in Britain.
I started knocking on doors and showing off just how excited I was by actually telling other people, look what I found. But yes, so it is very nice, and it's really great for a zoo archaeologist to actually have this connection with history.
We've got a plate and a bowl.
The bones could be dated because they were found with a pile of washing up, crockery from a grand in the early 1500s, which is when the first turkeys arrived here.
These were an exotic bird, brand new into the country, you know. People wouldn't have heard of it. What did it taste like? You know, what is this giant bird?
The first turkeys are said to have been imported by the explorer William 1520s, after he bought 6 from some Native Americans. Well, Strickland is said to have sold his birds for 2p each. 5 centuries later, turkeys are rather bigger business. 10 million of them due to be sold in Britain just over Christmas.
Off we go then, turkeys.
This Devon farmer wonders if the bones found down the road might be from those original birds.
Potentially, these, in some way, are direct descendants of the ones that arrived, and here they are back in Devon, so that's quite nice.
In what else but a sandwich box, the turkey bones have now been taken to the City Museum to go on display after Christmas dinner. John Kay, BBC News, Exeter.
Just finally, a bit of a plug, but we thought it was interesting. A cafe just around the corner from here in London's Oxford Street claims to be able to make the world's first selfie beverage. They are printing a chocolate powder portrait from a photo on top of your drink. They're calling it, of course, Selfie-chino. But unlike other selfies, of course, this one only lasts until you start drinking it. Over to you. Just very briefly, that top story again. Donald Trump's tax reforms look set to gain approval in both houses of Congress, despite a last-minute glitch over some of the small print, which means the lower house, the House of Representatives, will have to vote again tomorrow morning. Much more on everything on the BBC website anytime you want it. Thanks for watching.